Podcasters Roundtable, round 111. 111, right across the board. Nice number. Will Apple kick you out of Apple Podcasts? Soon to come. If you're already in there, are they going to give you the boot? Why would they do that? Sounds like crazy talk, right? Well, it is, but it makes for a good title. Secure RSS. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, we got a lot of good podcasting stories to talk about tonight. Including, what else do we have? Checking Google to see if your SEO is right. There's a whole, anyways, Dave will explain. Maybe we're not even going to talk about that. I don't know, Dave. That we had some tricky stuff with that one. 550,000 plus podcast in Apple Podcasts. It does say active shows in the slug, so we'll talk about that because that can't be right. Where's the most popular states that are the most popular podcasts in every state here in the U.S. and some loudness standards. So anyways, let's meet the round table. We have, well, Alan, welcome to the round table.
Hello, this is my second time, but the first time didn't really count because the hurricane threw me off.
That's right.
Sometime last year when you were doing a topic about international coverage. So thank you for having me again. And hello to you and to Dave and the guy in California who's setting up his microphone.
That's right. Sean's going to be joining us. He's a round tabler of the what do you call a repeat round tabler? I don't know. I don't want to be careful because
veteran.
Yeah, he's a podcast roundtable veteran. But we got to be careful because t-shirts getting close. Dave Jackson, co-host, welcome back.
Yeah, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com.
And then Sean Thorpe, who does support over at Blueberry. Oh, he's popping up. He will join us. Hopefully Google wasn't being kind to his mixer, so we'll see if it grabbed his mixer at all. Otherwise, we'll take built-in microphones. I hear your built-in microphone. But
you're still hearing my built-in?
Yeah, we'll take what we can get at this point. So
that's what it's going to have to be. I don't know what's going on.
Doesn't sound horrible. All right. I mean, that means he's close enough, right? If you have to use the built-in, get close.
Yeah.
Except for all that. Except for background noise, which built-in mics are brutal. We'll put Sean on mute patrol. There we go. All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
No. All right. I think he's got it. All right. It's gonna have to be tricky on the turntables Okay, I'm babbling today. It's been a while. We've been going for a little while. And I'm filled with, I have all kinds of crazy energy today. It's been a crazy day. Videos. I went and saw a podcaster talk who just got an exclusive deal, or Spotify signed him. He has a music podcast and they found him. They signed him to a big deal. And I wonder if I'm supposed to say this, but he said, because I was telling him how I thought Spotify kind of dropped the ball when it launched podcasts. Now they're finally letting other people in. And he sort of gave me an idea that Spotify has like maybe a board, or they have something where they have like their biggest goals. And I guess podcasting is number one. So a huge priority. They're going all in. They're paying podcasters some, right? When they sign to exclusive deals, paying a lot of money to hire these people to produce a branded podcast, essentially. It's not only on Spotify. He can distribute other places, but of course it's going to have some Spotify branding. So that's very cool. So I like that. I like paying podcasters to podcast. All right, let's dive into some stories. Obviously, we want to go with the lead here. I don't want to bury the lead, as they say. Maybe I already have because it's been like 5 minutes. But Apple will soon require secure podcast feeds. So I guess recently, I didn't get one, but Apple Podcasts sent out a bunch of emails to podcasters strongly encouraging podcasters to use a secure podcast feed with an SSL certificate. That's pretty foreign to, I would say, even the majority of this audience. Like, what the heck does that mean? And it says, in practice, this means a podcast RSS feed that starts with HTTPS. Now, you've seen this if you're banking or something. You go there, there's a little lock on the icon in Google Chrome. It's secure, right? Your information's encrypted as it goes back and forth. That's about as deep as I'm going to go with that. But it says the email, in the future, the email says a secure feed will be required for podcast analytics and also to submit new podcasts. So do you even know if your feed is secure? I guess is the first question. How do you find out? But also, does it mean that podcasts currently in Apple are going to get the boot at some point because they don't have secure feed? I do not think even 50%, 30% of people are ever going to come in contact with this information. They're not going to know what it means. It has to be YouTube simple, and this is not YouTube simple. So what does it mean for people who don't change to HTTPS? As far as I know, I mean, I would assume, and I got some feedback from Daniel as well, we do not think this means you're going to get kicked out of iTunes or Apple Podcasts anytime soon. Sean, you and Dave both have probably been dealing with this ever since the emails came out because you both do support, one for Libsyn, one for Blueberry. Have you seen people panicking over this?
I wouldn't necessarily say on our end there's been much panic, but definitely people are concerned about it and they are asking about it. The kind of the way we're dealing with it is, at Blueberry we have to determine how they're generating their feed, if it's a self-hosted feed or if they're doing it through us. If they're actually doing it directly through Blueberry, then it's pretty much already there. Or depending on what system they're using, we may need to add SSL to what they're using, but that's all stuff we do on the back end. It can be a little more work if they're, if they've got a self-hosted WordPress site and they're using the PowerPress plugin or some other method. It just really depends.
So if you are using PowerPress plugin, so it's coming from your own website, how do you transfer to a secure RSS?
This would be my recommendation. The first thing you want to do is check with the web hosting company because your feed lives on your website that's hosted by them, and see what their options are for adding an SSL to your site. And most of them have either their own service. For example, in my own case, I use DreamHost. And DreamHost just has it right in their dashboard where they can add a Let's Encrypt SSL to your site for free. And really all you have to do is just go into the dashboard, click a couple buttons, wait 20 minutes or something, and boom, you're done. And then the other thing that I did that's worked well for me is I went and just picked up a free Ssl Redirection plugin that sends all the traffic to my website to the HTTPS side, which includes the feed. So in essence, it's just creating a redirect, which we've talked about those before on the Roundtable. And pretty much everybody that's subscribed, their individual devices are going to see that redirect and just automatically switch over to the HTTPS feed. And in my case personally, and it seems to vary from person to person, we don't really know why, but in my case personally, pretty much all of the major syndication points, Apple, Stitcher, Google Play, they automatically switched over to the HTTPS feed. The only one that I had to go in and manually update was TuneIn. So it's pretty automatic for most people under most circumstances if they have to actually switch from an HTTP feed to an HTTPS feed.
Right. Okay. And Dave, I mean, I'm on Libsyn. I have a couple different feeds, but I think most of my stuff's on Libsyn at this point. And good news from what I know is I don't have to do anything. I'm hoping you're going to do it for me, Dave, is what I'm hoping.
That's basically just going. We're working with Apple to basically say anybody that has a Libsyn feed, can you please just throw an S on that bad boy? And because we've been HTTPS since probably, like whatever you were saying, 2014, wherever they announced it, we pretty much put that in place. And it's always been there just waiting for the day when somebody said, hey, okay, it's time. And that's basically what Apple did. I know I just saw someplace where Rob Greenlee from Spotify or Spreaker, yeah, wrong S. Spreaker was saying that Spreaker is going to basically do the same thing.
Yeah.
And work with Apple to have them, if you're using the Spreaker feed, update it, because otherwise it's, it's not a huge hassle, but it's a redirect. And it's just something that the average podcaster that's, putting out their sermons once a week, those people want to dig into that. So it's just great if you can have it automatically updated. So
yeah, and that's the key is that, trying to have a hands-off approach. You're trying to make content here and having to worry about this stuff. There will always be changes. One of the big pros of being on a dedicated podcast media host is that you can see this is sort of being taken care of for you, or in the case if you're doing it, creating your feed on your own website, Sean's got some ways to help you, but they have support, right? Even if you're like, I don't understand that, that's what Sean's there for, right?
So I'm glad to hear that it's a plugin basically that Sean has. It's like, okay, I think most people can install a plugin.
I'm going to jump in about that. I do it with the main tool that Sean mentioned. I use the PowerPress to create my RSS feed. I have been using RSS secure RSS feed and HTTPS on all of my websites since 2014, and I do have all of my websites with WordPress. The only thing that I did differently from what Sean said was I did not do it with a plugin. I did it by just putting the code directly into the .ht access file. In fact, DreamHost has that in their wiki. They have the code to put in there to accomplish the same thing without a plugin. There are some times when it makes sense to use a plugin if you have too many mixed content where some of them are not true HTTPS and you need to have the plugin do that. But if you have control over everything and you're able to make sure that all of the images and things like that are set up for HTTPS, then you can do it without the plugin. So there are some cases where you need to use the plugin if you have lost control of some of the graphics or things like that. But what the plugin does the same thing. The plugin adds that code to the HT access file, which is a file that exists on all web servers in order to tell the system what it's supposed to be doing. So yes, I do it with the same PowerPress, and I believe I'm trying to think how far back I went, but at least the recent shows that I did, I only submitted them with HTTPS, so it wasn't an issue for me.
So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, there are other reasons why we should have this on our websites beyond the RSS feed. Since 2014, Google results have been punished if we haven't had forced HTTPS on our websites, which was the main reason that I did it way back then. And the goal is we want to have in all of the modern browsers like Chrome and Firefox, we want to have a green padlock. If you don't have the green padlock, it means that something is mixed content. And the best way to solve that is to fix any graphics that are not coded. Any graphic that you put in, and we're talking about with WordPress, any graphic that you put in manually way back when with just HTTP, then that's going to show up as mixed content because your website is going to have some things that are secure and some things that aren't. So if you can fix those things manually, you're better off. But if you have lost control of that, then you can use one of those plugins, and it basically substitutes. Anytime it finds anything local that's HTTP, it substitutes it. It's only like a millisecond, but it slows things down a little bit. And of course, in general, when we're doing a website with WordPress, we want to have the least number of plugins possible because they can eventually conflict and slow things down a little bit. But we use them when we have to. And sometimes if I inherited a site from a client and it's just I'm not going to invest 20 hours trying to find out where all the things are, then I'll use one of those plugins. But for the sites that I make from scratch, I do it without the plugin, and I just have the redirect code in the .ht access file. So that anyone who goes to the website without, because nobody's going to type in HTTPS manually, unless they're doing a test or something. It just redirects anyway, there's a related article later on in our rundown, but I won't jump to that now. But that's just my feeling. Oh, and the other thing is with Chrome, if you have a website, this is important to say now. If you have a website without HTTPS, Chrome for several months have been punishing us every time someone goes to a form and they type in the first letter. It'll say insecure in the upper left-hand corner. And when the next version comes out, it's going to show that unsecure button all the time, and a few months later they've said it's going to become red. So they're basically making fun of websites that don't have HTTP access, HTTPS at the beginning, which is something that they asked everyone to do back in 2014, and they're basically saying it's late already. So we're going to gradually punish.
Yeah, it's choose your punishment. Do you want a slower site? Get punished by Google. You want HTTPS or HTTP? Whatever. Websites suck. Like there's always something to stay on top of, and good luck with that. But when it comes to podcasting, hopefully your host will take care of it. If not, definitely want to look into it, because I have some good notes on here. We don't wrap this one up because we're never going to get onto other stories, which is always a problem here. But some notes from Daniel, which I want to include, and he thinks also, I mentioned that it's highly unlikely Apple will kick out non-HTTPS shows out of Apple Podcasts, but they did already say that such shows will not have access to podcast analytics. So you want to have that if you want to get your analytics. And new shows, which is where I think the most critical point is, new shows will be required. So you'll probably have, in some point in the near future, submit a show, and if it's not HTTPS, it'll just tell you, hey, this needs to be secure, and you'll have to take care of that. Again, if you're, build on Libsyn or Blueberry or something that makes it easy for you, Spreaker, you name it, so you don't have to worry about that. But most web host companies will have some free SSL certificate option now, which is nice. Let's see, what else did Daniel mention? FeedBurner does support HTTPS. If you're using the special custom way he's doing it with the My brand, it does not. But Blueberry, actually, Sean, has a cool new option called podcastmirror.com, and it's basically FeedBurner but better, and it has a bigger limit than FeedBurner. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking into that kind of option, if you know why you might want that, definitely go to podcastmirror.com as your option. But all right, let's. That was one of my stories. That was one where we've chewed up almost half the episode. So the round. So let's get to some others. Again, podcastersroundtable.com/111 will have all the links to even the stories we don't cover. Some good stuff in here, so check it out. And Dave, you're next on the list. Why don't you choose one of? You've got three, so good job.
Let's stick with the theme of getting kicked out of Apple.
I love it.
So how do you get kicked out? It's really easy. If you try to spam the system, there was a keynote at Apple that James, I don't know what James's last name was, but he was mentioning different ways that you can get kicked out. And one of them is if you are actively trying to scam the system and spam the charts and things like that. And he twice he said, yeah, don't do that. Yeah, don't.
What would be, so when I want to test this out, how can I scam the system? What are they looking for?
Well, there was a company that you could spend $15,000 with.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
And somehow, I don't know if they were sending money to people to go to your local Apple store and subscribe to your show on every Apple product, or what the deal was, but they were somehow manufacturing subscribers. And
so don't fake subscribers.
Don't fake subscribers. Don't write robots to, just do it the old-fashioned way with talent and a little elbow grease. And then the story I put out here is from this weird company that was doing, they were basically repurposing other people's stuff. So they would take the very top shows, the Joe Rogans, the This American Life, whatever, the Two Dope Girls, and the company was called Owltail. And it was something like, they called it like the top 5. And what they would do is they thought they were going to be okay because they weren't taking, like, let's say they were doing it to my show, not that I'm a top 5 show, but whatever, they're doing my show. They weren't making a copy of it. I was still getting the download, but somehow they created the system, and this is where things got bad. Not that that was good, but then they came up with a system that once the episode was done, they'd play an ad that the podcaster was getting 0 cut of and didn't know they were doing it. And so Apple somehow figured this out and politely said, yeah, bye-bye, and kicked them out.
The good news is that Apple is policing stuff within its store, right? And it's going to kick out, hopefully, the cheaters when it can find them. I'm not concerned about telling you not to cheat and get kicked out. If you cheat and get kicked out, see ya. Like I would,
Yeah.
you don't have really. There's no room for you here. I don't. I'm more concerned about what someone could be doing. You know, not being malicious, not trying to cheat the system. They just think it's good tactic, like keyword stuffing, right? What is something that someone in this audience, is there something did they give a list or something? I mean, what is something someone could be doing right now innocently that would get them kicked out?
Well, I've seen people that won't get accepted because they'll put one of the 7, like there's a,
right. But you can get kicked. Have you guys seen, people can get kicked out for those things too, right? Like putting bad words in the title and not putting explicit or something.
Yeah, I had to help somebody this week that they had one episode that was explicit and they didn't mark it. And so Apple took them out.
When they say take them out, this means that they temporarily turned them off, or what happened?
It was from what they had said, they were removed. So it wasn't deleted. It was still like in their, Podcast Connect. But they're like, you need to fix this. You need to go mark it explicit and we'll put it back in.
Did they inform the podcaster? Most people would not know if their show got turned off.
It sounded from the person like they had been informed.
Subscribe to your own show, by the way.
Yeah, that's the big key. And so they had gone through and they'd fixed it, but you can't then resubmit your feed because when you go to resubmit it, it goes, hey, this is already in here, even though it's not in there. It's like it's
right.
It's archived. And
Sean,
so she had to deal with Apple to get it back in there, which she eventually did, but it took like a good week.
Sean, in your support role, have you seen people accidentally do something that got them in trouble?
Yeah, usually what happens is, in many cases, Apple will actually send the podcaster an email, but the problem is the email is very vague. It just says, your podcast is no longer listed in our directory. Thanks, have a nice day. So then they contact us and we begin the troubleshooting process, because sometimes there's just a technical issue with the feed and we just have to advise them on how to fix that. But in every case, at some point, they have to contact Apple support directly and go, okay, well, I've made these changes to my feed. Please look it over. And then usually within a few days, if everything's good, the show gets reinstated into the Apple Podcast directory. And it can be a struggle sometimes because, as I said, those emails they send tend to be vague. So if we can't immediately just go, oh, wow, the feed's invalid because this is broken, fix this, then usually the next thing that we do is we say, okay, well, you need to contact Apple directly and ask them why they took the feed out. And they will tell you, but it's that whole kind of extra step. It would be much better if in that initial email they send, they actually said, we delisted you, here's why. Yeah. And then you can just fix it. But instead, you get the generic message. You have to go ask them why. And if we can't figure it out, they'll tell you. So
yeah, I would save everyone a lot of time.
Yeah, and sometimes it is, that whole explicit thing, they're getting a lot more just watchful of that. So I would kind of suggest just any kind of uncertain language, just keep it out of your show title, keep it out of your episode title, keep it out of any of your notes that are potentially going to make it over to, Apple's directories, which for most people is going to be your main show notes. So, they don't necessarily care if you've got explicit language in your podcast itself, but they don't want to see those words in episode titles. They don't want to see them in show titles and, public places where someone who's just searching their apps might come across it.
Yeah, I find it interesting in the opinion section at the end of this article that Dave linked to. He says, if submission to Apple Podcast is a manual process, questions ought to be asked about why these were approved in the first place. Sometimes things can happen after, right? Submit one, change it afterwards. So that could have happened. But what I find interesting is that, do we know, as things grow, it becomes harder to curate things manually. Do we know, is the Apple submission process still manual? Do human ears check it every? I think we have an article about 550,000 shows, which we mentioned in the lead in here. Sean, you shake your head and yes. Does every submission to Apple still get checked by an actual person?
So far as I know, there is a point where a human does have to validate it. And
what are they looking for?
That's the last step. That I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, they're looking for,
because you can submit a classic trailer episode, right? Which is like 30
Right,
seconds
exactly.
of nothing, basically.
Yeah, exactly. That's why all the time we kind of, people talk about, oh, well, I want to launch and I want to launch on this specific date. And if they're hard and fast on it, I've got to be everywhere on day X. Then we go, well, what you need to do is put out the trailer episode so that you're already listed everywhere on your launch date. And I'm sure a human listens to that. I suppose more than anything else, they're just looking to make sure that maybe the audio passes kind of a basic level of listenability, and then that you're not saying that, you are the, happy, super clean podcast, and it's just a 30-second line of expletives that you didn't mark explicit. They probably won't accept that. But they're not going to obviously sit there and listen to every last minute of every last thing that gets submitted, because there's no way they could have time for that.
Right. And that explicit stuff that they're spewing is over a bed of music that you don't have the rights to play.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Which is going to, that's a big issue now with Spotify.
Yeah.
Music is going to get real tricky, but I guess that's a whole other topic on its own. Sean, let's just stick with you and have you pick one of your stories.
Sure. Well, the one that I think is pretty relevant to what we're talking about here is there was a recent TechCrunch article about how Apple is, quote, as I'm saying, quote, hosting 550,000 plus podcasts. And the main reason I want to bring it up is I just feel that's kind of bad reporting to say that they're hosting, because they're obviously hosting. I'm sure Apple probably produces a few podcasts in-house that they actually host, but we know that, podcast hosting companies or other systems are actually hosting podcasts. They're distributing them. And I don't know in this case if the TechCrunch reporter is just parroting a term that maybe they were, given by Apple, or what exactly their source was. So I just wanted to kind of call that out, because we do deal with this terminology a lot, especially from new podcasters. We always hear, how do I upload my podcast to iTunes? Well, you don't actually upload your podcast to iTunes. You're just adding a show to their directory, and your actual media files are passing through from wherever you host them. So I kind of feel like that just doesn't help that misunderstanding in general when people see that term in a publication like TechCrunch, which a lot of people recognize. But outside of that, I do appreciate that we have this kind of confirmed, I guess, number from a reputable source as far as how many listings there are in Apple Podcasts. Because I know Todd Cochran's been saying for a while that it's over 500,000, and that's obviously from the information that Blueberry pulls internally, but that, there's not like a press release out there about that. So it's nice to see that number, because then it's just one other thing that when we need to talk about podcasts to the wider world and somebody still goes, isn't that just some guy in his basement? Like, well, there are over 500,000 of them. So, I think it's good information to have.
That train hates you.
I know, it's the busiest time.
He knows, the conductor knows you're podcasting. Like I used to live that close really to a train, but so I get it. But they make, what's funny about the article is they actually make two what seem like big errors in a single sentence. They say here's the sentence: Apple Podcasts currently hosts, not right, north of 550,000 active shows. I doubt these are active shows, right? These are probably 550,000 shows exist in the directory. I would say, what do you guys, who wants to venture a guess? Dave, how many of those do you think are actually active? And then, of course, we're talking about a subjective term here.
I would say 200,000.
You think, you don't even think half shows. No. So by active, what do you, when it's subjective, what do you think when I say active show? What does that mean to you?
To me, put out an episode within the last year.
Last year. So that's a wide berth, which I like.
Because they're TV shows. They're TV show podcasts. I got to remember that.
Yep.
And they go like 2 months. So, if they have, let's say, a half a year, because their show, Today in Podcasting was from 2006. Me, Rob, right. Gary Leland. And that show technically is live. It's active, because we pay the bill and the hosts are still there. But, and it's amazing because it still gets downloads.
Sure,
and
of course.
It's like really old, outdated material. But that counts.
And that's why people complain all the time. They're like, my show is active. I publish every week on the same topic of a show that hasn't published in 3 years, and they're beating me in the charts. They get more subscribers. I mean, even if doesn't mean the content is out of date, or even if it is, people want to listen to that particular content, and they subscribe, not knowing that another episode is not likely to show up anytime soon. So, which is, I don't know if that's a problem. I mean, people have always stated that as a problem. But Alan, do you think that that's a problem if you're a current podcaster? Is that a legitimate beef? I podcast every week, but I can't beat the show in front of me, which more people are subscribing to, but doesn't put out active episodes.
I don't expect to be discovered in iTunes.
Oh, even better.
I don't count on that. I mean, if I get any listeners there, that's wonderful. But I don't count on that, and I do promotion outside of there. So, I don't lose any sleep over that. What's
the best? What's for you the best way people have found your podcast? Either by you doing it or something that it's.
I am not sure why, but I have an advantage that I take advantage of. Maybe that's redundant, but I publish a half a dozen articles in Pro Video Coalition magazine, and I am able to promote any of my other projects at the end of those articles. So I think that a certain percentage are being picked up by readers of Pro Video Coalition magazine, which is an online magazine.
Is it related content?
Some of it is. I have 4 active shows, and 2 of them are tech. One of them has to do with health. So even, and it's not in English, but, people worldwide read Pro Video Coalition, so they might be interested themselves, or they might just tell a friend about it. And the players are actually there, embedded at the end of the articles. So that's an advantage that I take advantage of. And I also use, Twitter and Facebook to promote them. But I do not count on iTunes, and I really don't know. In my stats, I can see how many people are listening through iTunes or Apple Podcasts, but that doesn't mean that they discovered it through there.
Right, so, of course. Yeah, and so, I mean, I think a good takeaway for the audience is that you are going to an audience that already exists, right? And I have found for videos, for, podcasts, get in front of the audience that is most likely to want to hear it. I'd be curious, if you list your 4 different podcasts, you would think that the tech ones should do better, and it would give you some idea that maybe it's coming from Pro Video Coalition. But at the root of it, team up with somebody. I mean, what you're not, most people don't realize is that, like you said, it's read worldwide. I mean, it's on the web, but that's a highly trafficked website. It's got a lot of traffic, so it brings a lot of people in touch potentially with your content. So if you're a podcaster and you're looking to get more exposure, again, we talked about gaming the system in iTunes. Like, don't spend your time doing that. If you are, you're probably just not the type. You're not in it for the content. You're in it for something else. You're trying to make a quick buck or something. And again, I don't care about that. Like, those people will be gone and they're not watching this show. But team up with someone who has your audience, because Alan's doing that and it's working out really well for him.
Exactly. And the only thing I'll add to that is that doesn't mean that I don't want to be in
of course,
iTunes. Right. I do want to be there, or Apple Podcasts. I want to be everywhere, especially the places where the listens count. And the only place where I am, and I don't know if I'm, we practically get no traction there anyway, but the Google Play Music,
nobody does.
We don't get credit for it, but it's such a low number of listens that it doesn't matter. So I think the trade-off in that case makes sense. But I don't want to be on anyone where I'm not going to be counted in my general stats. So, but I definitely iTunes. I mean, it would be silly not to be there, but I don't count on that to find new subscribers. If I get them, great, but I don't worry about it otherwise.
So, Alan, why don't we just stick with you and go ahead and pick one of yours? You pick either of these 3 stories that you have. Pick one that you would like to.
Which one is more interesting to you? Because
there's 2 here on loudness, and there's one on a 23
one
million
is
dollar
basically
fine.
a continuation of the other.
Let's go with the last one, because it's it's recent. It's very recent, and again, when we talk about secure RSS, the letters, even though everyone has gotten an email from, 150 emails about re-signing up to our list, or the GDPR XYZ 10 spam you thing. Let's talk about that.
Okay. In English, the acronym is GDPR, which is General Data Protection. I can't remember what the R stands for.
No one cares.
But in any case, the European government, the
Yes.
European community, and a lot of people thinks that they just did it a month ago because people didn't really hear about it too much in the U.S. before, but they actually did it 2 years ago in April. So actually a little bit more than 2 years ago, they announced it. And a lot of people thought that if they were not located in Europe or they didn't have clients in Europe, that they weren't under their jurisdiction, but as it turns out, they are. But I actually think it's a good idea, even if you're not concerned about getting a fine from the European government. And I imagine that they're probably, they have the money. They probably have lawyers in the United States on payroll to make examples and fine organizations. But I think there's a really good reason to do this, even if you're not concerned about that fine, because that's debatable whether a small content communicator, whether they do online radio or podcast or just text or whatever they do, maybe they just have a blog. But I think there's a good reason to do it, and it has to do with transparency.
So hold on, let me stop you because
okay.
I think most people are lost at this point. What are you going to be fined for, and what do you have to do?
Okay, the first thing that you need to do,
if you can,
you have to have a published privacy policy on your website.
Okay, so does that just text? Does it have to pop up? What is it just at the bottom?
It's subject to interpretation. All of the ones that I did an in between because I personally cannot stand pop-ups.
Right.
So what I have,
mine will be at the bottom.
I have a floating thing, and as soon as you press accept, it goes away forever, at least in that browser on that computer.
We have the same problem with this as we're going to have with Secure. And most people, this information will not reach most people who have a website. And you could argue that that's their problem or their faults. Will be interesting, like the Napster days when they start suing grandmas for downloading the Dixie Chicks. We'll see, then things will change. But, most people are not going to employ this. Most people do not have any idea about how this would even be done. I tried to do something with the email list here, sent out an email, 6% of people opened it. Does that mean I have to burn my entire email list because they didn't re-sign up for the new terms of the GDPR? Am I going to be fined? It's so confusing.
It depends how you interpret it. If you are able to determine whether all of them are outside of the European community or in what's called unknown territories because they blocked their IP when they signed up to your list, then you would probably be okay not burning them. But if you want to be completely strict about it, then you're supposed to burn them. So it's
you'll be the only one.
It's subject to interpretation. But if you know that they're in Europe and they did not opt in, then you're playing with fire by leaving them on your list.
Right. It's just like using AC/DC in intro music. In theory, someone will hear it and they'll sue you, but it's up to you to gamble. For podcasters, this is relevant because if you have a website, if you have an email list, two things I think you should have as podcasters, although this is one reason why it might be a good argument for podcasters don't need a website, even though I think you do. But Dave, did you do anything for this in regards to your podcast? Did you send out GDPR notices?
For my podcast, no. For the School of Podcasting website, absolutely. Yeah, I added a privacy policy.
But you have an email list for your podcast, right?
Yeah, and so for that, I sent out the thing. But I didn't.
Did you get responses? Did you then delete all the emails for people? Because MailChimp you can filter by Europe and stuff like that. Yeah. In theory, we now have to get rid of those people.
I refuse to answer that question on the.
I'm trying to incriminate you here live, Dave. It's recorded.
Dave gets the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, that's it. Luckily, I don't have that big of an email list. That's something. Here's a little 10-second tangent. When I moved from Aweber to a ConvertKit, never ever turn off your old mail system until you verified that your emails are in the new system. So I downloaded the zip file, uploaded all my other lists, and as I'm getting ready to upload the last big one, the School of Podcasting, I went over to Aweber and said, "Yeah, you're done." They're like, "Are you sure? Because we're gonna burn the bridge." And I'm like, "Yep, burn that bridge." and I uploaded the zip file and it said, this is corrupt.
I think like declaring email bankruptcy, it may not be so bad to just start over on the email list. The new people you get are the people who are probably actually open your emails. I find so many people on my list. You know, I mean, it's hard. Email open rates they're tough. I mean, a good open rate would probably be like, I don't know, 17, 20%. I don't know what good rates are, but they're lower than you would think. So
most of the stuff for the business side, I'm relying on Stripe. Like I can go in and look at credit card information, but I'm assuming now when somebody cancels their subscription, they're going to just, wipe out. I don't know how you do that. How do you wipe out somebody's information? And then what if they want to look at the history? The whole thing's messy, but I'm relying very much on the technology that I use to save my butt.
Yeah, it's with all of these things, again, I know that less than 20% of all people are going to know what to do or even going to hear about it, actually going to make a change. So it'll be interesting to see how these things shake out in the future. But let's see if we can.
I had about a half a dozen clients who read the article and came to me and asked me for help for different degrees, either on their website or to change everything at MailChimp. And
that's why these are good, right? It keeps right. People like that, and it keeps people like you and me in business. Oh, it's not my business, but if you do consulting, there's work for you always, because the powers that be are going to change things and confuse everyone. I may be hiring one of you soon to just fix my stuff.
It's funny because one person who contacted me, he said, I asked my webmaster, and he said that it's not our responsibility because we're in the U.S.
There's your key word there.
I said to him, it's a legal question. You don't ask a legal question for someone who's not in that field. Either ask your own logic or ask your lawyer, but don't ask your webmaster a legal question. Just come to a decision and then decide whether you want to do it or not. But it's not that person's field of expertise.
When someone comes to me and they use the word webmaster, I know they haven't asked a question about the internet since like 99. So
that was the term he used.
I know.
I'm quoting verbatim,
exactly.
That's
why
to say the source.
It rings bells. I'm thinking, yep, I can see why you need some help.
Don't ask your webmaster a podcast question.
Just yesterday, Dave, I was checking my hit counter, and it said my podcast is doing amazing.
Yeah,
I'll get the little under construction GIF on the bottom of my website. That's
so
good stuff.
I think this is a good idea, even if you're not worried about a fine from the European.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, if you
government. I think you can avoid a civil lawsuit by having the policy published. So I think it's a good idea to have it.
Yes, if you can do these things, and if you're listening to this show, you are the type that would actually take action on this. The 2% of us, do it, right? I mean, of course, protect yourself for sure. Yes, if you can do it and you're aware and you have the know-how, or reach out. You should definitely do both of these things. I don't think the majority will, but it's good if you do. That's the benefit, hopefully, of listening to this show. Don't get sued. We're aiming for that here at the Roundtable. Let's try to get a couple more stories in. Dave, do you have something else interesting here? What is this file format? This is hot, debatable stuff based on the. Read the title. We should always read the title because then it gives us context.
The title is Technical Analysis of Top Podcasts. And what it's looking at is...
okay, we're doing a different one. I like the file format. Is that the same one?
Yeah, same one.
So I like the title you have in the thing says file format. Are we worried about space and download speeds? Highly controversial.
Yeah, so I've always told people, you should be doing 64 kilobits mono.
32 kilobits...
Did I say 32, 64?
No, I'm raging the debate here. Mark Maron does like 23. It's something crazy low kilobits.
I thought it was 53. I remember it was this odd.
It's low. It's odd, but it's like under even like what we recommend at the low end.
Yeah, because I usually say 64 mono or 128 stereo.
32. Stitcher was one of my complaints. Stitcher used to take your file and make it like 32, and they always, even the CEO in talks, would offer this as a benefit, and I think maybe that's partly what this article was, as a benefit to the end user when it's like clearly it's for them. It's saving them money, right? I mean, the larger the file size, the more bandwidth they got to pay for. But you are able to get that changed if you're very interested in that for Stitcher, and I don't know if they've upgraded that. But anyways, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so what they did is they analyzed the top 100. I'm assuming that's out of Apple Podcasts, and I was surprised that 77% were stereo and 23% were mono. Because I've always thought mono, unless if you're really crazy about your music, or if you're doing some sort of thing that needs that stereo separation, you don't really need stereo.
I use joint stereo, which I've always called the middle ground, the happy place, the Goldilocks setting.
Now, can you?
It's just right.
I don't want to put you on the spot. What's the difference between joint stereo and stereo?
We've hit on this before. Not 100% clear. Alan might know because he is into that stuff. Sean may know because he's nerdy as well, like the rest of us. But for me, it's the benefits of mono. Wait, the benefits of stereo. It's like a fake stereo, but it makes it smaller. I don't know. Go ahead.
What I remember about it is that it, instead of including the information from the left and the right, what it does is it includes the differences between them. So it's a way of doing compression of the left-right balance. So that's what I remember about it, and there was one time in the past where I was using that, but now I'm doing 128 stereo.
He went up. Stereo. Most people don't go up. Sean, is that sound what you know about joint stereo?
Yeah, my understanding is pretty close to what Alan is describing. When you're doing true stereo, you are taking, the source audio and you are encoding it exactly on the left and the right side as what's in the original source. So in essence, what you're really ending up with is a file that actually has two complete mono sides in it. Whereas obviously if you've got a mono file and it's only got one channel all the way through. Well, joint stereo kind of looks for those differences between the two channels. And when it sees a difference, it puts it in there. But then otherwise, it mostly kind of keeps it like one channel across each side. It's kind of hard to explain, but that's essentially what's happening.
Now that works for me because what I like about it is that again, like I said, my completely untechnical explanation is that it's the benefits of stereo or fake stereo with the benefits of mono. So if you have music, it sounds like it's smart enough to kind of know there's some stereo stuff going on. It's not going to just make that music automatically mono, which is going to sort of center it in your forehead.
It won't waste space.
Yeah, it's great. It's compression, just like Alan said. Yeah. So anyways, that's why I love it, but it's not always a default. Yeah, I like it a lot. So anyways.
The graph shows that 53% are doing 128. I was surprised almost 15% are doing 192.
Yeah, well, people don't know. This is, again, people do not know this stuff.
Right. And then you actually go up to 256. There are 8%. So these are really high. And these are the people that upload one file. It's whatever, 30 minutes long. And then they want to know why they're out of storage space at their media host because you're using this giant file size. And I was always worried about download speed. Yep. I was always worried about space on people's phones. And it just may be the case that nobody cares about that anymore. We all assume that if you're listening to a podcast, you have
not at all. Yeah. The thing for me is I have like an artificial limit. We are an international medium, right? So you have to think that way. I mean, here in the US, we have incredible bandwidth for a lot of people, but even in the middle of the country, a lot of people don't. You have to think about people subscribe to probably a whole bunch of podcasts. So you should have some consideration for the end user and the bandwidth they may have. Cell phone plans, a lot of people don't have the ability to download a really big file like that and to do it not just your show, but multiple shows. So, I split the middle. This show right here oftentimes comes out 64 kilobits mono because we run 45, we always run an hour, sometimes hour 20. So once that 50 megabyte sort of threshold for me, even 40 is pushing it. I've seen complaints from other podcasts that I work on, from people who are in other countries saying, hey, this is 55 megabyte. I can't download this. Not everyone's on Wi-Fi, right? So it is something to consider. And that's why I enjoy joint stereo, but I'll do like a 96 joint stereo, but it's a sliding scale for me. I don't know about you guys, but I'll go anywhere from 64 mono up to, I don't do 128 anymore because I find 96 joint stereo, I am not really hearing a loss, and I'm pretty picky about those things. Technically, maybe you can hear some loss, but I know, Sean, do you have a sliding scale? Is it always the same for you?
I'm almost always 96 kilobit joint stereo, and I've been that way for over 10 years, 10, 12 years at least. I just feel like what you say, Ray, the sound quality between 96 joint and 128 is just not that perceivable to my ears. I think I have pretty good ears, and you still get a smaller file size, usually a more manageable file size. And to me, it sounds a bit better than 64.
Yeah.
Unless I have a very specific reason, if I'm working, I do some audio production freelance. If I have a client that says, my target is this, then I just give them the 96 unless they make a specific request otherwise. And I think that works well for most circumstances. Now, I guess if I really was putting out a really long show, then I might consider, because that file size thing is important, and we do need to, I think, keep that in mind. I'm fortunate in that, I do live in North America. My data plan on my phone is more or less unlimited. I don't download podcasts anymore. I just stream them. It doesn't matter if I'm on Wi-Fi, if I'm out. But I understand that I'm fortunate to be able to have that, and not everybody does.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny how many things we've talked about on this round that just add to the gives fodder to the idea that podcasting is too hard, right? These things we talk about, podcasting needs to be easier to be more inclusive of everyone. And so again, I think in the pre-show I talked about how podcasting really needs to be as simple as YouTube. It's kind of upload and move on to your next content. So we've talked about a lot of things, and I can understand why some people think this stuff is hard. And there's part of me that enjoys the difficulty because it does weed out some content that's just bad or not there for the right reasons, but we want everyone to have a shot. So definitely, hopefully some of these things. And I think in most cases, we've heard that, if you spend the money on a decent host, which doesn't often mean a lot more money, just means a little investment in your show, you'll, like a Blueberry, Spreaker, Libsyn, there's a few of them. It helps with a lot of this stuff. Now, related to it, I talked about the podcaster I went and saw today who got picked up by Spotify. Now, he may have a bigger reason. It's a music show. And if he's using music from Spotify that they're letting him license, he may have a reason to do 128 stereo, right? And so different considerations for every different kind of show. But Alan, we'll go a little bit more. This can get, again, we're going to make podcasting sound extremely difficult, but let's try to keep it real short, but briefly tackle one of these LUFS, the loudness units, full scale loudness standards for a podcast. Seems that you've got an article here about it being increased, and Spotify is one of the reasons for this.
Spotify is one,
yep.
And ALEXA is another one.
Oh yeah, we can't say that out loud. I got you.
No, but we're talking about the Echo devices from Amazon, whose character is ALXA, and for different reasons, Rob Walsh and I happen to agree about this, and I'm sure Dave has heard Rob talk about this. But both because of Amazon and because of Spotify, they've basically raised the bar. And some people might say, and some people might think that I'm going to say is sexist, but I'm talking about technical things now. Some people might think that ALXEXA is hot. Or hotter, and she is, but I'm not talking about the way she looks. She doesn't even have any appearance. I'm talking about the volume, the loudness that we hear. Both she and Spotify are minus 14, which is 2 lu or 2 lu louder than what was the de facto standard for online content up until before they did that. And that's why I decided to do it, and I published 2 articles about it. And the second one was about how to accomplish it. And the first article covered how to do it with Alphonic, and it said that Hindenburg Journalist was adding it. And then in the second article, I went into much more detail. I got a lot of screenshots, most of which I made myself, and some were supplied to me by Adobe. But the good thing is that it's much easier now to do this if we want to.
Okay, so I missed the core of this, but I'm assuming, first of all,
you missed the play on words with ALXA being hot or hotter, but we're not being sexist. We're saying that she's louder, so we're speaking in a technical way.
Yes,
so
peaking.
she's hot. She's
My question is
louder.
what loudness are you processing or producing your show at?
Because of ALXA and because of Spotify, I'm now doing -14 instead of -16, which is what
Not
we
a
were
fan.
doing before.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Well, let me explain the problem if you don't. If a listener hears your show on an Echo device, and they're going to hear ALXA's voice much louder than your show, and that's not a good experience, and it's going to make it seem like you don't know what you're doing, because they're going to assume
no one's going to listen and think it's the producer's fault. First of all, they're going to think, man, this little box is screwed up. But I'm obviously being a little ridiculous, but most people will not know the reason why Alexa sounds louder than the show.
Oops.
And again, almost. Oh, I did it. I don't have one. I don't have one of those devil machines, so I don't have to worry about it. But we're screwing up Dave. But
I got mine muted. As soon as he spelled it, I'm like, mute.
yeah. So you made the case. My question, Dave, you had the podcast about our friend here with an A. Are they pulling? Is it a separate file? Because here's the thing: I'm not producing it -14. It's too loud. Again, we're talking about another issue that almost nobody, as podcasters, most people are not doing loudness specs, right? And at some point, I think the platforms. Here we go. This is how it's fixed, and how it's going to happen. Platforms are going to start doing it for you.
Yeah.
Okay. iTunes, podcasts, whatever. They have this as an option. Used to be on your iPod. You could set, like, hey, do this thing that makes everything, it's called sound check.
Volume.
And it does it for you. So again, this cannot be up to the producer. A good producer will know it. A good producer will do it. The majority of people are not going to know it or do it. So I think the platform is going to do it. When we submit to the A and Spotify, are they taking their own file?
ALXA is a pass-through, and Spotify actually re-encodes it.
Yeah.
They which is bad, because it's taking our quality a generation down.
Yep.
But we can't control that. Whether we're at the level that it wants or not, they're going to re-encode it.
So I can tell you, for me, I'm going to stick with -16. I think it's accurate. I think it's the best way to go. But that's, again, it's subjective and it's opinion. I follow Produce New Media at Produce New Media. Paul, he's amazing. But again, if you are into this stuff, everyone's going to produce at whatever level they think, and they change it on us. Some platforms want something different.
It depends where you're going. Also, if you're going to be sending the same show to the BBC, it has to be at -18.
Right, but that's different because
exactly.
that's terrestrial radio.
Exactly. If you're sending it to an ATSC channel in the United States, it's a different number. So it depends where you're going. But as long as
that's not. But then we've broken the wall of podcasting, and we don't care about those radio people, Alan. We absolutely don't care.
Well, it's literally a couple decibels. I've looked at the difference between the two, and it's like you're
perceptually, Dave. It's about perception, and your ears are going to bleed.
Well,
or not.
It does. I know. For me, I have a daily briefing on the woman in the tube. So I'll wake up and say, "What's new?" and she'll play. I think it's like a Bible verse of the day, and then she'll play something like, here's something you can do with the woman in the tube. And then when the Daily Show comes on and they get that ba 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 that horn thing, it blows my head off. So they do need something to adjust the volume level, because
they need to just do it themselves. Like,
and then NPR comes on, it's like new from NPR.
We're still dealing with this. Like, the reason this exists, loudness standards exist in television and radio, is because people produce music to be louder than the next person. People produce commercials so that they stick out. They want it to be like in your face, and they want it to stick out, a commercial, so that you actually hear it. So the platforms need to be adjusting to whatever they want it to be. They need to do that however they're going to do it. But as a good producer,
I just want to clarify, Ray, what that means. If you're asking Amazon to do that, you're asking them to make a copy and do a generation loss, and also screw up our stats. So be careful what you wish for.
Well, I mean, some Stitcher does. There's pass-through stats too. Like Stitcher will actually send stats
through. Stitcher stopped re-encoding about a year ago.
Right. But even then, there are still some, like Spotify will send stats to Libsyn, even though they're taking your file. So it depends on the information that they want to pass through, because they have it.
Exactly.
It's a toss-up.
I would
It's a
agree
toss-up.
with you that it's a good idea for them to do it as long as they guarantee that they're going to send the stats across.
And maybe, and what I'm saying too is maybe the apps can do it, right? Like the iPod used to, I don't know if it was coming from the iPod or what, but maybe it's a solution that can be handled in an app. I'm sure Marco will figure it out at Overcast, and and I think he already has it. There is this feature in Overcast, and guess what? He's not taking your file, so it's already being done by the app. So the app should be doing this.
I agree with you. An app can do it.
I love Voice Boost on Overcast.
There you go. There you go.
I love that because I never have to, I set the volume and then it's usually pretty close, unless somebody just is clueless. And
again, yep. No, there it is. I mean, I agree. I think a good producer knows these things. I just don't think the majority of people, podcasters, are ever going to come in contact with any of this. So, and I just want our medium to grow. So it needs to be easy. Again, it needs to be easy. I don't know. What do you think? Sean, where are you producing at? Loudness.
Loudness wise, yeah, I'm still, I still, my target is still somewhere in the negative 16 LUFS range for the final output. And that's what I'm going to continue to shoot for. I think kind of my overriding thought on this at the moment is, so far as I know, none of these syndication points, that includes Apple, that includes Amazon, Spotify, anybody that even makes a suggestion as far as a loudness consideration, they are all suggestions. They're not actually evaluating your audio and going, nope, you're off. We can't have you on our platform. And the reason I say that is, I don't want people who hear this to have another freak out moment and go, oh no, I've got to make sure my audio is at negative this or negative
Sean
that.
just doesn't want the support call.
Right.
Well, I don't mind those. I mean, I wouldn't prefer a rush of them. Yes. But we talk about it in this episode. Like, podcasting does sound hard when people don't understand everything. Yeah. And for me personally, I'm just geeky enough that I kind of know how to do this. I have a system in place that seems to work, but I don't know for sure that it's the best. But when people just happen to come to me and they go, I'm concerned about this loudness thing, I say try Alphonic.
For sure.
They've got it figured out. They'll get you there with the least amount of work on your end.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, and Alphonic was the first one to add -14 to the list. Of course, -16 is still on the list, but they had it before any of the other apps that I eventually covered their screenshots and everything. Alphonic offers whatever you want it to be, depending on where you're going to go and what your preference is.
Georg from Alphonic is very good at iterating, and so yes, he is not taking a side. He's making it available to producer to have the tool that they want, which is really cool. Yeah, Alphonic is a big hit for me.
We love Alphonic.
Yes. Let's see. Thanks for putting up with my energy today. I told you I had a weird energy, man. I'm just ready to let's go rounds. Let's go rounds. So we covered a few stories. We got most of what's on here. That's about our time. I should let the live people go back to their lives. But if you have anything else to quickly add, feel free. Otherwise, we will thank you and give us the one URL, the one podcast you want anyone still listening to check out. And that'll be it. Sean, thanks for joining the Roundtable. Sean is he's a go-to for the Roundtable. When I need some technical stuff, I bring on Sean. So thanks, Sean. Of course, if you're close to 10, this will be the last time we see you, but thanks.
I still got ways to go. I think maybe this is Roundtable number 5 for me. Yeah. So I've still got a few opportunities left, but thank you, Ray. It's always an honor to be here. You can find me at my main website. That's Shawn, SHAWN.mx. Everything I do is listed there.
Very cool. And Alan thinks we made it. No hurricanes taking out the broadcast tower.
It's not even raining.
The internet's held up. It's not even raining. All right. Well, it's summer here in the U.S. So, although Miami, summer probably still means. Are you in Miami? Probably still means rain.
Yes, I'm in Coral Gables, which is adjacent to Miami.
Very cool. All right. Well, where do you want you have several podcasts, but where do you want us to find?
Just have them go to alantepper.com, which is LANTEPPER, and then everything else is available from there.
Very cool. Yeah, check out Alan's stuff on Pro Video Coalition. He's highly technical. He dives into the stuff. He goes deeper than I have the patience for. So I appreciate Alan and all the good stuff he's doing over there, and very, very good. And
so, what is the state where you live? Because you obviously live in a state where you are able to use joint stereo without a prescription, right?
Yes, California, of course. I've been using joint for years here in California, so joint stereo is legal. No prescription. Okay. Yeah, I just bought joint stereo on the corner before this episode, so this one will be coming to you in joint stereo. Actually, it's mono. Okay, I'll stop going with the joke. I got rid of all the joke. All right, Dave Jackson, co-host, please reel it in here, buddy.
Yeah, you can find me at schoolofpodcasting.com.
Whew, an hour goes fast. And that's good because it is summer. I shut off the air conditioner. People are sweating. Podcasters, we
sweat for our art,
sweat for our craft. There we go, our art. All right, everyone. Podcastersroundtable.com/guest. If you're still listening, you're the type of person that would go over to there and sign up so we can get you onto a round. Again, it's much easier. You don't have to have a topic, even though I need to change the email form. I probably need to ask you about GDPR first, so maybe that may never happen. But we will bring you on a couple stories, and we'll learn from your experience. That's it. Round 112 next time. Wave goodbye. Man. Oh, that's the mouse doesn't work. You got to use the trackpad.